And we're on.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the March 16th, 1:30 p.m. City Council meeting. And at this time, we will stand for the pledge and prayer by Milton Uli. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. Father, we thank you for today. Father, we thank you for all the blessings this city enjoys. Father, we're blessed. We have legs that brought us in, eyes that see, ears that hear. We have prosperity. We have many blessings, and for that we are truly grateful. Father, we lift up this council. We ask for your wisdom as we make decisions for the citizens of the city, that we may serve them well and wisely. Grant us your wisdom. Father, we lift up our first responders whose jobs that are at times inherently dangerous. We ask your divine protection on them. Father, we lift up all those who wear the uniform of the armed forces of this country that are in harm's way. We ask your divine protection on them and bring them home safely to their loved ones when their tour is over. We thank you for all of our blessings. This we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. At this time, we have a presentation of proclamation proclaiming April as Child Abuse Prevention and Awareness Month in Borger. And I don't see anyone that's here, but I'll go ahead and read the proclamation. Whereas the citizens of Borger recognize the crucial need for efforts by both individuals and groups to promote awareness of the plight of abused children, to work toward prevention of violence against children, and to provide services and treatments to these small victims of their families. Whereas Amarillo Area Court appointed special advocates, the Bridge Children's Advocacy Center, and DFPS Advocate for Children of Abuse and Neglect. Whereas Hutchinson County confirmed 73 children suffered from some form of abuse or neglect in 2020. Whereas our society has a responsibility to protect our children and help them thrive in a safe environment, as every child is entitled to be loved, cared, and I bet this is probably right.
Yeah.
Okay. Wherefore, our society has a responsibility to protect our children and help them thrive in a safe environment, as every child is entitled to be loved, cared for, feel secure, and be free from all types of abuse and neglect. Whereas effective child abuse prevention and intervention programs succeed because of partnership among a variety of entities, including but not limited to schools, religious organizations, law enforcement agencies, child protection services, the Bridge Children's Advocacy Center, and CASA court-appointed special advocates, prosecution agencies, medical professionals, mental health professionals, victim advocates, and other community-based nonprofit organizations. Now, therefore, we, Mayor and Council members of the City of Borger, Texas, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2021 as Borger Child Abuse Prevention and Awareness Month. And in doing so, urge all citizens and institutions, both public and private, to support the Bridge Children's Advocacy Center, Amarillo Area CASA, and DFPS, as well as other partner agencies in their efforts to increase awareness of and services for abused and neglected children in our community. Given under our hands and seal of office this 16th day of March 2021.
Are you, Counselor?
Yes.
Picture.
Macy Dawson. Okay, nice. And that's
They're probably going to want a picture.
Yeah, let's go.
Here.
all right. Yeah.
you for what y'all do.
Short agenda, we were like, no! So then we're like, but we appreciate you guys so much.
Now, do
Thank you.
y'all work for the bridge or?
We're with CASA, so yes, court appointed special advocates, so. Thank you guys so much.
Thank y'all.
Okay, at this time, we'll have question and comments from citizens, and I see none, so we'll move on to consent items. If anyone would entertain a motion.
Entertain a motion to approve consent items 6 through 9.
I'll second.
And all in favor? And they pass. In item 10, consider and take appropriate action to adopt ordinance O-003-21, authorizing the issuance of City of Borger, Texas, combination tax and limited pledge revenue certificate of obligation series 2021, providing for the payment of said certificate by a levy of an ad valorem tax upon all taxable property within the city, and further securing said certificate by a pledge of a portion of the revenue collected from the city's municipal hotel occupancy tax, authorizing the execution of any necessary engagement agreements with the city's financial advisors, and providing an effective date. Mr. Edwards.
Yes, Mayor. This is the first of the issuances associated with the aluminum dome project. It is for $7.75 million, the majority of which will be paid for out of the hotel occupancy tax. Some INS funding will be used, but this funding is dropping off from debt that we are paying off already, so that won't, certainly, we've reiterated that many, many times, that it will not affect your tax rate that you get now, and that continues to hold true. I think we had a good response from the bids. We had 4 bids that came in at 11 o'clock today, and Andrew Friedman with Samco is here to kind of answer any questions council may have. I know this ordinance is kind of unusual for you guys in the fact that everything comes in at the last moment, but that's just kind of the way ordinances concerning issuance of debt works. Because time is money when you start clicking interest off on $7.75 million. So, Andrew, would you care to explain kind of where we're at?
Absolutely.
I know you probably have a standard explanation.
Well, Andrew Friedman with Samco Capital Markets, proud to serve you all as financial advisor when it comes to issuing debt. Mr. Edwards is exactly right. The ordinance is only finalized once we price the securities. And the reason for that is, and a lot of cities have maybe 2 readings of any given ordinance. There's an exemption to that when it comes to issuing debt, because as the investment banks that buy these bonds, once they submit a bid, you have to approve that. If it were to take 2 readings or longer, they would walk away. Interest rates could move away from them, and all of a sudden they're not getting the same deal that they thought they were. And so that's why the timeliness of this maybe puts an onus on you all to review and approve something in short order. This ordinance follows all of our other ordinances as they're concerning debt. But getting back to the sale itself, received bids at 11 a.m. this morning. We received 4 bids. The best bid coming from R.W. Baird out of Milwaukee with a TIC, true interest cost, which is roughly the average interest rate of this 20-year financing at 1.69%. So very, very low interest rate, certainly lower than what we had, the interest rate we used in the planning process for this CO. We do that for a couple of reasons. One, it's always better to under-promise and over-deliver, but also we have to take into account interest rate risk that through the planning process, and it takes at least 46 days from being able to authorize the notice of intention, which was the last time I was before you all, and make that 46-day publication period, to then locking in an interest rate today. We don't know what interest rates are going to do, and as a matter of fact, interest rates increased pretty sharply if you follow the Treasury bond market over the last several weeks. So it hasn't impacted municipal bonds as much, but locking in a 20-year interest rate below 2% is pretty incredible. So certainly the cheapest financing the city's been able to do and may be able to do in the foreseeable future. But with that, I apologize, I'm looking at my phone. I'm coming from another meeting in Dumas, so I wasn't able to print off all of the numbers, but I believe you all have the numbers in front of you. And so I'll go through those quick or briefly, and then I'm happy to dig into them and answer specific questions that you have. So please do not be shy. But the first page, the sources and uses of funds, you'll see titled at the top. We are going to issue a par amount of bonds of $7,465,000. You'll see there's accrued interest. That's the interest that will get paid back to the city that begins accruing from the date of date. But because we are delivering the bonds, you're actually going to deliver these bonds to the underwriter on April 14th. That's the closing date that you're going to get money. They're going to credit us back with those 2 weeks of interest. So that'll flow to your interest and sinking fund. And then you'll see there's premium, $505,000. I'll explain that in the next page because it's a little easier to follow the math there. And then below that, you can see the uses. We're going to, even though we're issuing $7,465,000 worth of bonds, we are still going to put, net of cost of issuance, $7,775,000 into the city's project fund at closing. That's net of the underwriter's discount, the cost of issuance, et cetera. That's what you're going to have to spend towards the project. And then you can see below there the accrued interest that we'll receive, $6,000 some odd dollars, cost of issuance just over $90,000, and the underwriter's discount. That's RW Baird. That's the fee that they are charging for their sales force to go out there and market these bonds to the individual investors. That's what they're paying themselves. And then you've got bond insurance premium of $16,900. That bond insurance premium is what allows us to sell these bonds at a AA credit rating, helping us get the lowest interest rate possible. That's a one-time premium the city pays, and that basically guarantees the timely payment of principal and interest. Even though we're going to make that payment, it reassures the investor of these bonds that they don't need to worry about that. It allows us to lock in a lower interest rate, and we're paying a one-time fee of almost $17,000 to do so. Our bond rating is A+ stable, very good investment grade rating. The bond insurance companies, their credit rating, is AA. And so that's a few notches higher than ours. It allows us to sell them based on that AA credit rating, helps us get a lower interest rate. The determination of whether to use bond insurance or not is really just a break-even analysis that we do at pricing. In this case, we're going to save more in interest than we're going to pay for this premium. And so that'll be in effect for the life of the bonds until they're refunded or finally mature 20 years from now. The next page, the bond pricing page, and this is how I'll help explain the bond premium that's allowing us to sell less bonds but still put that larger project fund deposit into our bank account. We can walk through that here. You'll see, moving from left to right, you've got the maturity date. We're going to pay principal payments on August 1st of each year, beginning in August 1st, 2022, until final maturity, August 1st, 2041. Every year, we're amortizing and paying off a different amount of principal. You can see that column to the right of the maturity date. To the right of that is the coupon payment. And the coupon is the rate at which we're going to pay each investor for each of those bonds. You can see the coupon rate is 4% in the early years. It drops to about 2% in the latter years. That pricing structure is determined by the winning bidder. So we're, as the city and as your advisors, we're not concerned about the couponing structure that they go with, so long as it generates the lowest average interest rate. To the right of that, you can see, and we'll look at just the first year, 2022, we're going to pay the investor of those bonds 4%. In this market, and what they're locking their pricing into, that maturity only yields 0.22%. So that's a big disparity of the interest we're going to pay in that year versus the actual yield that you would get out in the market for those bonds. So to make up that difference, they're going to pay us a cash premium. That's the far right column that you can see. So for each of those years where the coupon rate, and in this case is true for all of them, for each maturity, the difference between the coupon rate and the yield generates a different cash premium. If you add up all of those cash premiums on that far right column, you get to the premium from the first page, $505,000. So that allows us to issue less bonds than what we're going to receive in our project fund. And that's going to help cover not only the project fund, making that the full $7,775,000, but also the cost of issuance and that underwriter's discount and bond insurance premium. It's kind of difficult bond math to explain, but that's functionally how it works in the bond market. So does that make sense?
Yes.
And you said the average is 1.7.
So we'll flip down once, and that, it was 1.69% from the bid we received.
Okay.
So then, once we do that, we go through and restructure based on everything, make sure that we're hitting the annual debt service targets that we want. If you flip to page 5, the bond summary statistics, the true interest cost there, you'll see is 1.6872%, so it comes down a little bit. The reason for that is because we assumed that we'd get a higher interest rate on this than what we ended up locking in. When we restructured, we were able to move more principal into earlier years, which allows the interest cost over the course of those 20 years to decline. So it allows us to even tighten up that interest rate a little bit more by paying off bonds sooner than we would have at that higher interest rate. So that's a lot of information, very detailed. I'm happy to go back over it. I turn it over to you all for questions. I think this is a great result and a great bond sale. Just coming back from Dumas right now, where we sold bonds the exact same 20-year fixed interest rate. They have a lower credit rating than you all, but you all are right there in terms of the number of bidders and also the interest rates that we're locking in. Yours is a few basis points better to your benefit by virtue of having a better credit rating, but it tells us that we're, in both instances, the market is moving in lockstep with each other, and you're both getting good deals. So very pleased with the result today.
Yeah, at 1.68, sounds awful low. I was expecting more. Is that?
It's where the market is right now. There's not a lot of supply of municipal bonds out there, and you've got this kind of continual flight to quality of good investment grade, tax exempt debt that's pushing down interest rates and keeping those bond prices higher. So
Okay.
it's
So a lot of cities, because of COVID, aren't floating bond issues. So you're saying?
There's certainly been a lot of that. There's just a lot more demand out there in the investing community for tax exempt debt than there is supply. And so
Okay.
everywhere has different reasons. Certainly earlier on in the pandemic, cities were not gung-ho to go borrow money when they
Right.
thought that their sales tax revenue stream was dried up and they didn't know what was going to happen to their property tax base. Obviously, as the pandemic has played out in a lot of places, that's ended up not being the case at all. And some places have seen their sales taxes either stay steady or increase, and you've got more people coming to market. But overall, it's helped keep the bond prices high and the end result, a lower interest rate for the city.
Yeah.
I think that to put that in perspective, Eddie and I looked at just the cost savings over our initial estimates using our conservative estimates. So the annual payment, we're saving around $60,000 less than a year than we had originally budgeted on this, which equates to around $1 million overall interest savings based on the final interest rate that we locked in. So we're definitely,
And this is fixed rate.
Correct. It will not change for the life of the loan. They
From
will
this
be
point
called.
forward, these numbers are hard numbers.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's great.
No, they will not change. They'll be callable 10 years from now if there's an ability to refund them, or if you're just flush with cash 10 years from now, you can pay them off early. I don't necessarily foresee either of those instances being, particularly true, but we'll have the ability to call those in 10 years, just like we do with all of our other bonds
Yeah.
and COs.
but that's one of those things that, I'd like to say from the beginning too, since this is tied to hotel occupancy tax, we now have a fixed payment for 20 years on that dome, but our hot tax is a percentage of the room rate. And over the next 20, you're not gonna pay the same for a room today as you do in 10 years. And so our revenue stream,
Should increase.
is going to increase even though our payment now is fixed.
Yes.
And so that's what makes this a pretty, attractive financial project for the city, to invest in our community, knowing that we've got a fixed rate, a fixed cost, and probably an increasing revenue stream.
Absolutely.
Any more questions?
I don't think so.
Sweet.
I think given the great rate we have, I think it kind of behooves us to move on forward with the venue tax issuance probably sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
So we're going to start working on that one pretty, well, I think the ball's in our court right now, but you guys will get all that information by the end of the week. So,
Okay. Well, moving forward on that, and we don't have a definitive timeline on how that venue tax bond will progress. But the attorneys, Mark and I have been working through that along with Eddie and Garrett. And as all that information comes together, we'll be able to start bringing in all of the relevant parties and come to a determination of when we can price that and bring it back before you all for approval.
Will a venue tax and a hotel tax be looked at, and I'm asking you to speculate, by a bond buyer as pretty much the same level of security? I know
No, the
they're going to
venue
be
tax,
more afraid of a
that
venue.
carries a much higher degree of risk for the investor.
Okay.
These COs are, as you read in the caption for the ordinance, secured by your ad valorem taxes and then a limited pledge of an additional revenue source. So the investor, when they look at that, looks and says, okay, this has the full faith and credit of the city of Borger's property tax behind it. Even if it's not even your intention to use your property taxes to repay it, they know at the end of the day that if push came to shove, you would levy a property tax to make the debt service payment rather than default on the bonds. A venue tax bond is secured by the hotel occupancy tax, that venue tax that's been authorized. And in this case, we've got an additional
Yeah,
ad
but
valorem
it's a
pledge.
limited
And
part of ad valorem of 3%.
And so we expect that our venue tax bond, because of that ad valorem additional kind of kicker pledge, will do better than if it did not have that. But you will notice when we price, whether that's in May or whenever that, we bring that to market, we will not be locking in 1.72%. It will carry a much higher interest rate. Now, would expect that to be below, at this point, probably 3%.
Okay.
But we're, again, subject to interest rate movement between now and that time.
Right.
That will also impact it.
Okay.
Which is also the big reason we separated the project like we did with the two debt issuances, so that we didn't pay that higher percentage rate on the total.
On the total, yeah.
Yeah, the total, it'd be it's a much smaller, 1.8 is what we're looking at.
Yeah, it's a
So
smaller
much
amount.
smaller amount.
Yeah.
But
Tickle pink, thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you. All right, at this time, we'll entertain a motion.
I move to adopt ordinance O-003-21, authorizing the issuance of City of Borger, Texas combination tax and limited pledge revenues certificates of obligation, Series 2021.
Second.
All in favor? And it passes. So we'll move on to item 11.
Very
Sorry.
quickly, I have-
Oh, yes, sorry.
Something that needs to be signed by you,
Yes,
Madam Mayor, and then attested by the city secretary, so I can let the
okay,
bond purchasers know that they can
all right.
start moving these off their books. And there's 2 copies there for you to sign.
you need to go ahead and send it off. Kathy's, she can
I
scan that
it
in.
on my phone.
Oh, okay.
Recently learned about that new iPhone feature, taking advantage of.
All right, thank
Thank you very
you,
much.
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all. Look forward to seeing you again here shortly.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and we'll move on to item number 11. Consider and take appropriate action on an emergency bid from L.A. Fuller and Sons on a bid to replace water and sewer lines in East Alley of the 500 block of North Main Street. Mr. Edwards.
Yes, as council's aware, we had a sewer line collapse in the 500 block of Main. The guys with the wastewater department have been vacuuming out the manhole here at 6th and Main. They do it virtually every single day in the morning to prevent people upstream from getting water up or sewage backing up into their businesses. Council's also aware that about 2 months ago, we awarded a bid for a replacement of utilities in the 400 block of Main, kind of in conjunction with the parking lot. So rather than go out on a full competitive bid, we, basically wanted to do this as an emergency measure. We asked L.A. Fuller to provide us a bid based on the unit prices that they had bid previously in the 400 block, which they agreed to do. There is an adjustment for depth because it is a deeper line in the 500 block to the 4. So some of the unit prices are a little bit different, but all in all, it's actually a very, very reasonable bid. 200 and, what was it, $32,000 to replace both the water line and the sewer line in that block, and then put the asphalt back. So in the 400 block, there is a difference. It was $257,000, I believe. There's additional manholes that are being replaced at that are not. There's a reason why this bid is actually a little less. So it would be my recommendation that council go ahead and award this bid to L.A. Fuller, and let's get them started on it, and let's get it done as soon as we can. So right now, we're paying, those guys obviously overtime on the weekends to come out, and of course, they come up every morning. It just takes a lot of time out of their day to take care of that every day.
Yeah, sure. And it's still in the budget from.
It is. We have actually budgeted $600,000 for the replacement of the utilities in the fort, and it came in at $250,000.
Yeah.
So we have plenty of money in that budget line item to include this as well. So there's no change in the budget needed to fund this project.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be pretty to have all that lot backed up
No.
in those businesses. So.
No.
Does anyone have anything? If not, then we'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve a bid of $232,158 from L.A. Fuller for the replacement of the water and sewer lines in the east alley of the 500 block of North Main Street.
Second.
All in favor? And it does pass. And we'll move on to item 12. Consider and take appropriate action on Resolution R-011-21, approving an interlocal agreement for subscriber access to the Amarillo Potter Randall Regional Radio System and authorizing the city manager to execute the agreement. Mr. Edwards.
Yes, Mayor and council members, last year you guys approved a new radio system for public safety for our fire and police to the tune of about a $3.6 million project. And if you remember, we also at the same time approved an agreement with the county where they shared in the cost of that project about $1 million. The county has since paid us that $1 million, and we've made that initial payment to the radio. And that construction of that system is well underway. In order for that to really get to work to the fullest extent possible, it needs to be connected to what they call a core controller. Amarillo and Randall County own dual core controllers, and they want to expand this, expand that into a regional radio system. Basically, and hence there is a benefit to them and a benefit to us, is once these are connected, that controller controls talk groups and frequencies and various things, but more importantly, it allows even a portable radio in the northern part of Hutchinson County to talk to another portable in southern Randall County. Just expands regionally that geographical footprint. So likewise, Randall County's radios will work just as well up in this area if they're up in here working. And they come up occasionally. If we have they have their SWAT team and things like that responds all over the panhandle. So the agreement itself is no maintenance, no costs between the cities, because that's the benefit to each city, is the expansion of the geographical footprint. The only cost that would be associated with this particular agreement is the monthly cost for the connection between Borger and Amarillo for either a fiber optic cable or a telephone link. That determination of how we're going to connect to that is yet to be made. That's going to be $500 to $750, maybe even $1,000 a month. We just don't know what that is yet. That's a very common cost. We have those already between our facilities for network service, things like that. The only other cost that could come in the future is the expansion of the licensing of that core system. There's 24 slots remaining available to be used. We're going to use 2 of them. So as other cities come on, if they ever need to expand that cost will be shared equally amongst all of the participating cities. That's the one unknown cost, but that cost could be 10 years in the future or longer. We'll know what that cost is way before it comes, and we'll have plenty of time to budget for it.
So in theory, if more municipalities or government agencies join The cost could go down?
The cost goes down, the more and more it joins, and also, but the geographic footprint,
Go
where our
bigger.
radios will work, expands.
Yes.
And this, our system was designed around this, we'd always planned on tying into Amarillo's core, and we had those talks early on.
Yeah.
To kind of put that in perspective, if we were to have our own core, to run our own two-site systems, it would have raised the price by about $1.8 million. And so we're putting in the simulcast sites, which tie to that. So, there is a significant savings in doing this, and then it gets the eventual benefit of sharing the system.
And does this affect, because, personally, I would think that it really would come in handy for emergency management.
It
Because
does.
they're, that's pretty important to be discussing with Amarillo and stuff. like
Right,
that.
and especially, I think, when we talk about wildland responses and
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
like that, when we
Emergency
start getting more
communication.
agencies, and we're still at the, Amarillo, Potter, Randall were kind of like where we are with our radio system. Their radio system was pretty antiquated to the point to where they were going to have to do something, and we were kind of in that same boat, so we're still kind of in the early phase of how this might regionally play out. But, a lot of times it takes that one expansion, and like our sites are covering a significant portion of Carson County and a significant portion of Moore County, just kind of where they're located. So, as you start looking at potential expansion, that means Carson County might get by with just one site. And we've been talking with Pantex and some other things on some things there what might push Carson County into the system a little sooner. So, it is moving, and I think our eventual goal is our maintenance and contracts and stuff like that, as it expands, you share it amongst more people, so your unit cost goes down.
Yeah. Sounds good. Anyone else have anything? Okay, if not, we'll entertain a motion.
I move to adopt Resolution R-011-21 approving an interlocking agreement with the City of Amarillo and Randall County for subscriber access to the Amarillo, Potter, Randall County Regional Radio System, and authorize the city manager to execute the agreement.
Second.
All in favor? And it passes. And item 13, consider and take appropriate action on Resolution R-012-21, establishing the city's intention to reimburse itself for prior lawful expenditures of funds instead related to the acquisition of fire apparatus from the proceeds of a future issuance of certificate of obligation. Mr. Edwards.
Yes, Mayor. As you recall, back in January 2020, council approved $729,000 for the purchase of a new fire truck. That fire truck was ordered shortly thereafter, and those things have about...
To replace
a 25-year-old fire truck, correct? Those things have well over a year delivery date. We are expecting delivery of that maybe towards the end of the second quarter of 2021. We still don't have a firm delivery date. I don't know how COVID has affected the scheduling there. But as you know, we had, in work session, we had a discussion about bank qualification of when we issue debt. Anytime a city issues, a city is limited to the issuance of $10 million of debt in any calendar year, in any form, to receive a bank qualification. Bank qualification just simply means is a vehicle to get a cheaper interest rate. There again, when we're going out and issuing what we just did, $7.75 million, you want the cheapest interest rate you can have, and obviously I think we got that. So what that means is, and we're going to issue another 1.8, coming up with the venue tax. That puts us right at that $10 million mark. So it was always been our intention to go out and probably just use our local depository, Amarillo National Bank, to, borrow the money for the debt for the fire truck. Now we're not going to be able to do that in this calendar year. Otherwise, we're going to cross that $10 million debt issuance limitation. So what this does, it would allow us to go ahead and just pay for that fire truck. We have the funds in the reserve. That may deplete the funds below, depending on where we take it from and things. There again, we haven't worked all that out yet. But what we're saying is, if we want to be able to reimburse ourselves for buying this fire truck in a future debt issuance, probably in 2022, then we could redeplete that reserve at that point in time. Without this resolution, we could not do that. So this resolution carries no cost right now. It simply provides an option for us to replenish our reserves if we so choose, and if that's how we buy that fire truck, out of funds from a future debt issuance. That's really all this resolution does. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Kind of confusing, but it is a requirement of debt issuances that you declare your intention to do that, to reimburse yourself for a prior expenditure, and you have up to 36 months to do that.
But it's very possible we won't do debt for that.
Very possible we may
that
choose
amount.
not to reimburse ourselves. We don't, there again, but if we don't have the resolution in place before you issue that debt, or before you pay for this purchase, the ability to replenish our reserves, if that's what we use, is not there.
This limit is a state
It is
statute?
in the state statute, yes.
And I assume it's tiered by population.
I'm not sure how it's tiered.
I wouldn't imagine Austin has to live with a 10 million.
No, the 10 million is. that's-
Everybody.
Everybody.
It is universal.
It is universal. I'm sorry. I didn't understand the question.
Okay. And bond, you know, a bigger city like Amarillo or Austin that are high growth, that have AAA credit ratings, there is no difference between bank qualified and not bank qualified, because at a AAA, they're gonna get the lowest rate on their own.
Okay.
And that's kind of what Andrew was talking about with the bond insurance going up. Once you get to AAA,
That's it.
Yeah.
and that's, you know, what Amarillo's a AAA credit rating, and at that point, there's
There's little
really no
difference.
distinction for them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're kind of, Samco's estimate is that, you know, being bank qualified gets you about 20 basis points. So that 1.69 could have easily been 1.8. Still a good interest rate, but there again, we're talking about interest being paid over 20 years. I'd rather pay 1.69 over 20 years than 1.89.
Yeah.
So,
I was curious about the limiters.
The bank qualified just opens it up to different types of investors when it's a smaller, but a big city like Austin, you know, they're not issuing $1 million. They're probably not even ever issuing $10 million debt issuances. They're issuing hundreds of
millions.
millions of dollars.
Yeah. Okay.
If there's nothing else, we'll entertain a motion.
I move to adopt Resolution R-012-21, stating the city's intent to reimburse itself for all prior legal expenditures for the acquisition of fire apparatus from proceeds of the future issuance of certificate of obligation.
Second.
And all in favor? And it passes. And we'll move on to item 14. Consider and take appropriate action to approve an agreement to purchase between the City of Borger and Yesenia Robles for the entity-owned property located at 113B and 115 Turner Street. Mr. Spradlin.
So we did one of these here a couple of weeks ago. Well, I think we just approved the tax deed last week for a property on Nonkin. So these properties on Turner currently have manufactured homes on them. They have been taken back for back taxes, and they were on our demolition list. So we haven't put them to sale with TGS yet because we wanted to get the substandard structures on before we let somebody bid on the property. So in this instance, like we did last time, is we can enter into an agreement with a private individual that in exchange for the demolition of the structures at their cost, then we can transfer the property to them once the structures have been demolished. So Ms. Robles she's actually bid $250 per each property plus the demolition cost of those two structures. In return, she's asked for a 90-day time period to demolish the structures instead of our normal 30 days that we did on that last one. However, I think given the bid and the fact that there are two, I don't think that 90 days is unreasonable. They are quite conscious she lives at 111, their property is quite well maintained. And so, city staff believes that this would be and she is the neighbor, these would extend her property. And, the goal would be that she takes as good a care of these final properties as she does her own right now. So staff has no revisions. And like I said before, we sign the property over, we'll get a tax deed in front of you again. Of course, we have to confirm that she's done it, to our standards and that it's clean. However, I feel, pretty confident in that based on her, you know. If you're gonna take that care of your current property, it's not like you're gonna get the property right next to it to junk it up.
Right.
But I'd entertain any other questions. If you have any, like I said, if once this is approved, it's still gotta come back to you before you approve the tax deed to transfer it.
And it did say that it'll all be in, with, you know, in concordance with the city ordinances, and so they'll go and look at it and everything before that.
Right. So what happens is that they make the, you know, TGS is still kind of our third party, TCG, sorry, is still our third party in this, and so they deal with that, and then the homeowner tells them that they've got it down, they call us and say, hey, go look at this, we go look at it and say, hey, it's good, then they prepare the tax deed and send it to you,
Okay,
or us, and I get it to y'all.
sounds good. And at this time, we'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the agreement of purchase between the city of Borger and Yesenia Robles for the entity-owned property located at 113B and 115 Turner, and authorize the mayor to execute the agreement.
Second.
All in favor? And it passes. Item 15, consider and take appropriate action to introduce on first reading ordinance O-004-21, adopting the 2018 International Fire Code. Mr. Pender.
Afternoon.
So this is adopting the 2018 fire code, like I said. This is just getting in line with the rest of the city's codes that they've already adopted, I believe, last year. They work together, they're a team. So they reference each other, and a lot of the information is the same. So it's just updating to the new 18 code from the 2012.
This one took a little time because we, you know, like Jason said, we kind of have to compare it to the building code once we adopt the building code, just kind of see what needs to be changed. You know, and there were some other things, and we do know we have a pending work session coming on solicitors and peddlers, kind of as how we deal with mobile food vendors. And so the one section, that's kind of the one big change from the existing, is there is a section on mobile food vehicles that we have opted to remove
Yeah, I saw it's
exempt
deleted.
from right now, because, you know, that needs to work in conjunction with whatever changes we make with the peddler solicitors and moving the food trucks into their own ordinance that we have coming with a upcoming work session. You know, there's some things we can talk about that, I want to talk about that, but we, after discussing with Jason, and you know, we need to get this adopted. We've got some commercial construction that's probably pending, and, you know, we want to get the newer code up and get it in line with the building codes. But I just kind of wanted to warn y'all that when we start talking about food trucks, we'll probably revisit the fire code, and we might amend this again, depending on how we work through that. You might amend it to reinstate that section when we do the bigger ordinance change.
So I know this is probably not a very smart question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So you can do an ordinance to tweak the fire code for a city,
Yes.
for your own? Okay.
And we did that, you know, when we did the building codes, you know, there were some sections and some stuff that we changed. Now, where we have to be careful is, you know, you start changing it too much when the insurance service organization comes in to do your evaluation and rate you for what they're gonna, you know, the insurance service organization, which is ISO, we hear this a lot with fire, but they also do your building program too. And they grade your programs. They grade your fire suppression program, and they grade your code enforcement program. And those numbers are what are used by your insurance agencies to calculate your insurance rate. So just like on the debt we just passed, we got an interest rate based on our risk. ISO does the same thing, and then adjust, you know, most insurance companies have a base homeowner's rate per square foot, and then they adjust it by your fire capabilities and your code enforcement capabilities. So if we tweak it too much, or we don't adopt these, our rating goes down and our insurance rates for our citizens go up.
So this isn't like, you know, where we can't do an ordinance that does anything against Texas. This really isn't the same thing at all.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, international building codes and fire codes are standards put out by organizations of that type. You know,
Okay,
and you can,
okay, so it's
you
not
can,
like
you
a
can
Texas
change
state
anything in
law.
that book, but that's kind of like the gold standard of best practices.
Okay,
Does
makes
that make
sense.
sense?
Yeah, there's
Okay.
many-
None of that
There's-
is state law, but
Thank
cities
you, that's
adopt
what I
those
sure.
codes as, rather than us try to write all of that whole book, and there's about 5 more that goes with it, all the, we
of
just
reading.
adopt the code into our ordinance, and then we go by that.
You don't have to have a code, but if you don't,
That makes sense
you're
now,
going, you're
okay.
going to pay somebody for it. Do you pay city staff that lives in the
Yeah.
community to give you fire protection and to enforce codes? Or you want to send it to your insurance company who's just gonna take that
And that's
profit and
why
send it
y'all
to?
made some tweaks for,
And-
that affect this, just to be better suited for this city.
For us, correct.
Yeah.
Okay, makes
As I
sense.
say,
Yeah, no one code works
One size
perfect
fits
for
all.
every community, so
that
you
makes
tweak it
sense.
and you make it.
Like in the building code, the one thing that we took out because we're not required in Texas was the building code does require residential sprinkler systems in new construction. However, a lot of cities in Texas have chosen to,
To remove it.
You know,
Exempt that
residential
section.
fire suppression.
Yes.
yes,
Sprinkler system.
like sprinklers. Of course, you know, the trade-off is what the industry will say is if you put in a suppression system in your house, you can go down to 1/4-inch sheetrock. But my argument with that is who wants 1/4-inch sheetrock, even if you can use 1/4-inch sheetrock? You know, most of us for sound reasons and other things, you want a 3/4-inch sheetrock or something, but there are, you know, that's kind of been in all the building codes, a lot of times, that's been the hottest debate of late. You know, it's easy to justify things, suppression systems in commercial buildings where public is invited and it's gatherings and, you know, we have some liability and the safety of our community. It's a little different when you're talking about your very own residence that you choose to live at and you choose to buy and you choose, you know, you have a little more control over that.
But everything's grandfathered.
Yeah,
Yes.
But new construction or new stuff must meet compliance with the new, with
Right.
the code.
and so that's, and really, you know, Jason can reaffirm or confirm or dispute or whatever, but there are not massive changes from 2012 to 2018.
Most of it's gonna be pretty similar. I mean, we'll see some.
Good.
Most of it's, you probably won't notice overall. And the most of it's, if it's in here, a lot of it's gonna be in the building code as well. So it's gonna be caught over there probably anyway. So there's not a whole lot.
So do you have to know
that's gonna
both of
jump out.
those, Jason? Being the fire marshal, or fire marshal?
I'm sorry, you said it again?
Do you have to know both those codes?
Oh, I don't, I'm not gonna say I know all this.
Oh, okay.
This is
But
a
you know where to go.
This is a reference.
Okay. But you have to, I mean, you
Right,
have
I'll
to,
look at all of
the
them.
building ones and
to-
all. Oh.
I'd say same thing as Larry, when we usually get together, we work together and
Oh, okay.
review and figure out what needs to happen.
When they do plan reviews, they all meet together and do it in conjunction.
Okay.
Because there are, you know, Larry will be able to find out that, you know, you need an electrical outlet someplace else that isn't mentioned, but Larry doesn't know
Right.
where the fire truck needs to park or where the fire hydrant needs to be.
So it's all a team effort.
Well, that's great.
And it works better that way, because then we're not stepping on toes. And
Yeah.
even the contractors, we've got to get them involved as well. It's just, it's easier to get it up front than afterwards.
Yeah.
It makes it a little bit difficult when something's already happened. So we're just trying to update it.
Like I said, I would just reiterate with all the codes that we enforce, I think the one thing that the public doesn't really understand is that it does impact that insurance classification, which impacts your cost. And so we're not doing code enforcement and fire codes and
Right, absolutely.
building codes to be mean and just to regulate you. It's directly tied to your pocketbook. And we talked a lot about this when we did the SAFER grant to add firemen at the fire department, which got us, when we went from an ISO 4 to an ISO 2, it was about a 12% reduction on your homeowner's insurance.
I want to thank y'all for that, because that wasn't me.
There you go.
And so, you know, we are talking about a significant amount of money when you compare, you know, insurance rates to people that live out in the county versus people that live in the city. That's kind of the biggest difference. You know, they talk about having to comply with restrictions and having city property tax, but that property tax, in most cases, is significantly, if not completely, offset by your reduction in property insurance. Because that insurance company sees less risk in a house in a city because it was built to code, which means it's likely built better. and you do have the fire response and things like that. So it is important that if we are more than 5 years behind in our code cycles, we lose credit.
Okay.
And so there again, I mean, you have a choice, but you don't really have a choice.
Makes sense.
But they don't update this, but what, every 3, 4, 5 years?
3 years.
3 years.
3?
3.
Yeah. The 2021s are just now coming out, so.
We'll be in front of you before too long,
Probably within 12 months, I would say they need to be back here again,
Okay.
updating to 2021.
Because we skipped the 2015 cycle, which is why, you know, a lot of the other regional cities are on 2015, but that's now out of, you know, and COVID delayed the 2021 release, so most cities are jumping onto the 2018 in the region, just because the 2021 is not quite ready. But if you're on the 2015, you're outside of that 5-year window.
Okay.
But 2018 is going to be getting really close to that 5-year window. But most of the times, we don't see a lot of changes. I mean, keep in mind, the biggest things that drive changes in code a lot of time are new material or new technologies and building material. We've gotten pretty good at that. It doesn't change just drastically.
All right. Thank you, Jason. Thank you
problem.
for what you do, too.
You're welcome.
I think he's happy to be dealing with some fire stuff again instead of some vaccines and
I
pandemic stuff,
bet.
so.
That's one.
Yeah.
He's back to a little bit of his primary job roles, which he, you know, kind of thought he was signing up for, at least when he took this job, instead of the weird stuff he's been dealing with the last 12 months.
I'm ready to get back to a normal.
Yeah, yeah, I asked Jason Whistler if he ever thought he would be going through this kind of thing for, as an emergency manager,
It's
you know,
different. It's not what we
yeah,
expected, that's for sure.
No, that's not the emergency you expect.
No, it's new.
I guess it's
It's
been
our
interesting.
first pandemic.
Yeah, that's true. Well, y'all did a great job through that too, so. Does anyone else have anything? If not, we'll entertain a motion. Thank you, Jason.
I move to introduce on first reading ordinance O-004-21, adopting the 2018 International Fire Code.
Second.
And all in favor? And it passes. And item 16, consider and take appropriate action to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Second.
And all in favor? And we are adjourned. Thank y'all for coming.